When it comes to military ships and boats, it's nuclear subs, aircraft carriers, and guided missile cruisers that steal the spotlight. After all, they're the most iconic representations of a nation's might. That said, smaller and lesser-known craft like the ones included in today's video often play equally significant roles during times of peace and war. Unconvinced? Well, stick around. We're about to take a look at 5 impressive but lesser-known military ships and boats. Unlike famous World War II figures, Generals George S. Patton and Omar Bradley, civilian Andrew Higgins isn't so well known these days, but his contributions to the war effort can't be overstated. In fact, none other than President Dwight D. Eisenhower once said, "Andrew Higgins is the man who won the war for us." The president added that if Higgins hadn't designed and built the LCPS landing craft vehicle and personnel, or Higgins boats as they were commonly called, getting men and war material onto the D-Day beaches would have been nearly impossible. But ironically, Higgins had a heck of a time convincing military brass that they needed his revolutionary boats. In fact, he once famously stated that the Navy doesn't know a damn thing about small boats. As far back as 1938, Higgins marketed his craft to the Navy and Marine Corps, but though his original Eureka boat was better than what they had, its major drawback was that men and equipment had to be unloaded over the side, a dangerous and time-consuming endeavor under enemy fire. Later on, Higgins improved his design to include a droppable ramp that allowed vehicles to be driven off and men to charge directly out of the front and onto the beach, and rapid unloading allowed Higgins boats to make multiple trips in the time it took predecessors to make just one. According to legend, Higgins was a hard-drinking entrepreneur and tinkerer of Irish descent who originally built boats in his Louisiana workshop for trappers, oil prospectors, and booze smugglers. His boats were well suited to operating in the shallow marshes and swamps along the Gulf Coast, and with war looming, he was convinced that his designs would be in high demand and that the Navy would need thousands of them. Higgins also surmised that steel would be hard to come by, so to hedge his bets, he bought a huge amount of mahogany from the Philippines prior to the war. Constructed largely from wood, Higgins' new boats featured relatively flat bottoms, which meant they drew barely 3 feet of water aft and just a few inches up front. On the downside, they were notoriously unstable in choppy seas, which caused many troops destined for combat to succumb to the ravages of seasickness while en route. Higgins' boats were 36 feet 3 inches long, 10 foot 10 inches wide, displaced 18,000 pounds empty, and were capable of carrying a 36-man platoon or a jeep and a 12-man squad in their gear, or about 8,000 pounds of cargo. Power came from either a 225 horsepower Grey Marine diesel or a 250 horsepower Hall Scott gasoline engine, which gave them a top speed of 9 knots when loaded. The boat's only defense came from 2 30 caliber machine guns, and their wooden hulls left them vulnerable even to small arms fire. At a time when segregation was the norm, Higgins' factory employed thousands of black workers and women, and all told, more than 23,358 units were built by Higgins Industries and licensees. Relatively small, blindingly fast, and impressive by Navy standards, the PT, patrol torpedo boats built by the Naval Division of Bayonne, New Jersey's electric boat company, Elcol, served with distinction throughout the Second World War. The most well-known was the PT-109, which on the evening of August 2, 1943, collided with a Japanese destroyer near the Solomon Islands, killing 2 crew members and injuring skipper Junior Lieutenant John F. Kennedy. Kennedy's purported heroics rescuing survivors after the incident served him well throughout his political career, which culminated in his election as the 35th President of the United States in November of 1960. Along with the Navy's most versatile craft, PT boats' roles included providing fire support for amphibious landings, laying and destroying sea mines, rescuing sea and airmen, and attacking enemy warships, though it's generally agreed that many claims of the latter were bolstered or outright fabrications. PT boat development began in mid-July 1938, when the Navy issued requests for prototypes to a number of boat builders and designers. Though they shared some commonalities, the boats that entered the competition had differing lengths, hull designs, armament packages, and power plants, and among those participating were none other than Higgins Industries of New Orleans, Louisiana, and the British Powerboat Company, whose design would largely influence later Elco PT boats. To determine performance, seaworthiness, and durability, sea trials were held in 1941, the most notable of which was a particularly grueling 190 nautical mile full-throttle course between New York's Block Island and Long Island Sounds. Known as the PLYWOOD Derby due to the boat's predominantly wooden construction, both men and machines suffered mightily during the trial, but Elko's 77-foot boat fared the best, with an average speed of more than 45 miles per hour, despite reports of 10-foot swells. Elko eventually won a contract to build 400 PT boats, all of which were powered by 3 Packard liquid-cooled V12 aircraft engines featuring superchargers, intercoolers, and 2 spark plugs per cylinder, and during the war, power rose from 1,200 horsepower per engine to over 1,800. 80 feet long, 20 foot 8 inches wide, and displacing more than 50 tons, the boats were capable of exceeding 50 miles per hour under the right conditions, and they were generally crewed by 3 officers and between 12 and 14 seamen. Launched from gunwale-mounted boats, PT boats' main anti-ship weapons were 2,500-pound Mark 8 torpedoes that packed more than 450 pounds of TNT and had ranges of about 16,000 yards. Other weapons included 7.62mm light machine guns, twin 50-caliber heavy machine guns mounted in open ring turrets both fore and aft, and in some instances 37mm anti-aircraft cannons, rocket launchers, and mortars. Throughout their service lives, PT boats' effectiveness were limited by faulty torpedoes and light construction that often relegated them to coastal areas, though they were partially successful at attacking German coastal supply barges in the North Atlantic, hence their nickname, Barge Busters. Now only one original PT boat remains, the 80-foot Elko PT-617, located at the Battleship Cove Naval Museum in Fall River, Massachusetts. In the 1979 blockbuster Apocalypse Now, Captain Willard Martin Sheen was tasked with killing deranged Special Forces officer Colonel Kurtz Marlon Brando, who'd gone rogue in the jungles of Southeast Asia. Significant portions of the movie involved Willard and an accompanying crew on board a PBR patrol boat River, making their way even deeper into the unknown, encountering everything from firefights and USO performances to Bengal tigers and spear-wielding tribesmen.
I was being ferried down the coast in a Navy PBR.
The nature of the conflict in Vietnam forced the Navy to add non-traditional watercrafts to its lineup, and when they were introduced in 1966, PBRs began operating in conjunction with ground and airborne forces and aircraft to keep South Vietnam's waterways clear of mines, munitions, and Viet Cong infiltrators. The Mekong Delta encompassed more than a quarter of South Vietnam's land area, was home to half its population, and was crisscrossed by thousands of miles of rivers, creeks, and canals, many of which were unnavigable by traditional boats. Designed for just such conditions, fiberglass-hulled PBR boats drew between 1 and 2 feet of water, and thanks to their twin 180 horsepower Detroit diesel 6V53 engines and cutting-edge propulsion systems, they were capable of high speeds, amazing maneuverability, and operating in shallow, vegetation-choked water. Unlike boats with standard propellers, PBR's thrust came from powerful pumps manufactured by the Jacuzzi Corporation that spewed 6,000 gallons per minute through 2 nozzles below the stern, allowing the boats to turn 180 degrees from full speed in just 1 boat length without rudders. Battle-loaded PBRs weighed 10 tons, could travel 150 nautical miles between refuelings, and topped out at about 33 knots, though their engines were so loud they could be heard from as far away as 3 miles. As part of the Brown Water Navy, so called for the Delta's chocolate-colored water, PBRs were an integral part of Operation Game Warden, which largely saw them interdicting junks and sampans notorious for hauling war material and Viet Cong soldiers between the North and the South throughout the war. PBRs were armed with twin open-turreted 50-caliber M2 machine guns in the bow, a single 30-caliber machine gun aft, and another M60 machine gun or M18 grenade launcher amidship. Boat crews usually consisted of a captain, engineer, gunner, gunner's mate, and seaman, all of whom were expected to fulfill multiple roles as needed. For additional protection, especially when off the boat, crews were armed with standard infantry M16s and, in some cases, 45 caliber pistols. PBRs were built by the Uniflight Boatyard in Bellingham, Washington for about $400,000 each, and during the conflict about 300 were delivered to both American and South Vietnamese forces. But though they served with distinction, their fiberglass hulls were prone to cracking and corrosion, and engine and pump nozzle intakes were susceptible to constant clogging from aquatic vegetation, mud, fish, and turtles. Nearly 88 feet long, 47 feet wide, and tipping the scales at a whopping 185 tons, landing craft air cushion LCAC amphibious vehicles are impressive by any standards. Powered by 4,000 horsepower TF40V gas turbines driving 2 massive airplane-like propellers, loaded LCACs suck down nearly 1,000 gallons of fuel every hour, and at full tilt, they're capable of traveling nearly 300 miles at more than 40 knots with a 60 50-ton payload. LCACs are primarily used by the United States Marine Corps, but despite their notable specs, they're typically crewed by just 5 servicemen and women. They're essentially huge inner tubes that deflate when loading and unloading and inflate while moving, but their topside steel structures house everything from engines and fuel tanks to the wheelhouse, crew quarters, and a large central cargo area. But unlike traditional boats, LCACs skim over the water's surface on a thin cushion of air produced by blowers underneath the hull that create pressure greater than the atmosphere above. Together with downward thrust and lift, this pressure difference causes the craft to levitate while at the same time being propelled forward, hence the unofficial name of hovercraft. In fact, their unique design gives speedy over-the-breach LCACs access to nearly 75% of the world's coastal areas, whereas less than 20% is accessible to conventional landing craft. LCACs mainly transport troops, vehicles, and equipment from larger vessels offshore to beaches and other rough coastal landing areas, and they're the only craft in the Corps' inventory capable of moving M1 Abrams main battle tanks in this manner. Development began in the early 1970s when 2 prototypes were built as amphibious assault landing craft AALC test platforms, one by Bell Aerospace in Louisiana and the other by Aerojet General in California. Feasibility studies concluded that both large hovercraft were capable of performing the roles for which they'd been built, but ultimately Bell's machine won out and became the basis for contemporary LCACs. The first LCAC wasn't delivered to the Navy until more than a decade later in 1984, though it would be another 2 years before it reached official operational status. Since LCACs aren't technically fighting vehicles, they're relatively lightly armed by Navy and Marine Corps standards, but defensive armaments include 50 and 30 caliber machine guns as well as 40mm grenade launchers. In the past, LCACs also served in mine countermeasure, evacuation, special forces delivery, and even humanitarian assistance roles. Many of the 97 LCACs produced were built in the 1980s and 1990s, though when inflation is taken into account, the cost per unit tops $40 million. Though they were originally slated for retirement in the early 21st century, LCACs have benefited from a number of service life extension programs. Less than 20 feet long and totally weaponless, the US Navy's Beaver-class security tugs aren't the most impressive launch in the fleet. In fact, they're among the Navy's smallest vessels and are often described with unflattering adjectives like cute and adorable. I mean, unflattering for naval vessels. Affectionately known as boomin' beavers, Beaver-class tugs were previously used in civilian applications, primarily wrangling heavy clusters of waterborne logs at sawmills in the Pacific Northwest. However, in their new military roles, they're often tasked with towing small ships and keeping larger vessels like cruisers, subs, and destroyers safely apart in tight ports, harbors, and naval bases. But the role they perform most frequently is tending floating barriers or fences designed to keep military areas free from unwanted civilian craft at both active naval bases and around historic ships, like the 200-plus-year-old USS Constitution on display at Boston Harbor. At about 19 feet long and 10 feet wide, the 22,000-pound boats draw as much as 5 feet of water, and most are powered by 5.9-liter, 260-horsepower Cummins diesels that transmit power to a steerable jet nozzle instead of a traditional shaft, prop, and rudder setup, making them particularly maneuverable. Definitive information on Beaver-class tugs is spotty at best, but online sources claim the Navy has between 10 and 40 of the little pushers that were manufactured by a now-defunct boat builder in Washington state. Some of the more active tugs are based at California's Point Loma subbase near San Diego and Naval Base Kitsap just west of Seattle, Washington. A few years back, the General Services Administration auctioned off a Beaver-class tug in Kings Bay, GA, and according to their website, it featured a steel hull, a heated and air-conditioned 3-person cabin with fans, windshield wipers, sound insulation, and an impressive navigation suite, including magnetic compass, radar, and depth finder. Though the auction's opening bid was a paltry $250, 11 more were placed, and ultimately the little boat went for the princely sum of $100,025. So I really hope you enjoyed that video. Please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you've got a suggestion for a future side projects video, please let me know in the comments below. And thank you for watching.